Good morning. Welcome to Home Suite Extra Home, how accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, and other alternatives can boost the housing supply in New Hampshire. Let's welcome our panelists. Alexandra Galanis, who's manager for research and data analytics for New Hampshire Housing. James Veo, who's the principal planner for the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And Abby Bronson, who is director of policy and advocacy for the Community Loan Fund. Just one brief aside, we just loaded the new issue of New Hampshire Home. It's our Home Design Awards. And this year, for the first time, we have an award for ADUs. And they are beautiful. The entries were beautiful. So it just shows you what you can do with these small spaces. And to you, Alexandra.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you all. Well, I can't really see you, but it's great to see you to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Sorry, it's 1 second. Okay, everyone can see my slides? Okay, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alex Kalanis, and I am the manager of research and data analytics at New Hampshire Housing. My work focuses on analyzing housing market trends, affordability, and supply challenges so we can better understand what's happening across the state and inform practical solutions. So today I'm going to walk you through a snapshot of where New Hampshire housing's market stands today. So we're going to be seeing prices, rents, and supply, and what those trends mean for households, employers, and communities. But before I get into that, I wanted to quickly just give you an orientation of those who don't know about New Hampshire Housing. We are an independent self-supporting corporation established by New Hampshire state law in 1981. We are not a state agency, and we receive no operating funds from the state. We are also board appointed by the governor and approved by executive council. Our mission is to promote, finance, and support housing solutions for the people of New Hampshire. And just to show you quickly, these numbers highlight some of the achievements that have been realized over the past year through our work with partners of all kinds across the state, lenders, realtors, for-profit and nonprofit developers, municipalities, and so on. So just here you see, here is a quick snapshot of the state of the market in New Hampshire. And on the home buying side, we can see that the median sales price in 2025 reached about $535,000. Even with inventory at around 2 months statewide, this is an extremely tight market. This is still a seller's market, and we're well below the 6 month that's typically considered balanced. On the rental side, the median effective rent is just around $2,000 a month, with a statewide vacancy rate of 4.9%. But vacancy is even tighter for affordable units at under 3% compared to just over 5% at market rate. And this data comes directly from CoStar, and the home buying market data comes directly from New Hampshire Realtor Association. This slide shows, I'll give you a minute. It's a lot of information, but this is one of my favorite slides I love to show. It really does really show how much housing affordability has eroded in New Hampshire over time. Since the late 1990s, home prices have increased far faster than household incomes, even after adjusting for inflation. In 1998, the median home price was roughly 3 times the median household income. By 2025, it's more than 5 times the income. The long-term implication for future buyers in New Hampshire is that home ownership is becoming increasingly out of reach for a typical household. Over the past few decades, home prices have grown much faster than incomes. And by 2025, the median home price is more than 5 times the median household income. That means many buyers, especially first-time home buyers, which I'm a renter and I love to buy a home, but unfortunately, I can't even afford the median sales price in today's market. We need higher incomes, larger down payments, or significant compromises on location, size, or housing type just to enter the market. As a result of how unaffordable today's home buy market is for the typical household, people are buying later, staying renters longer, or being priced out entirely. Without meaningful increases in housing supply or more lower cost ownership options, these affordability challenges are likely to persist rather than correct on their own. Now, this slide, it gets a little more into the different types of properties that are in the market, and we're comparing between new and existing. And so I just wanted to ground what affordability actually looks like for a typical New Hampshire household. The median household income estimated, I know census usually the latest 2024, but we do estimate, and using Congressional Budget Office inflation factor, is about $103,000, which puts in an affordable purchase price at roughly $320,000. When we compare that benchmark to actual market prices, the differences by property type are really striking. Single family homes are the least affordable option. We can see that at new construction, they're at $800,000 and is about 7.7 times the median household income. And as we can see, and again, this is actually New Hampshire Housing's data analysis. So we have New Hampshire Realtor Association, and then we also have New Hampshire Housing, which I compile, and we get to break it out by new existing versus new. So as we can see, even condos, new is for 2025 was at $651,000, and that's about 6.3 times the median household income. And existing, yes, it's kind of a little more affordable, is at 385 at 3.7 times. And then now if we look at manufactured homes, we can see they're much more affordable compared to single family and condos at 2.6 times median sales at the median household income at 269,000, and then for existing at 159,000, and it's only 1.5 times. So we can see that manufactured homes stand out as the most affordable ownership option in the state. Both new and existing manufactured homes fall much closer to or even within traditional affordability guidelines. For many households, this is the only ownership option that truly aligns with their incomes. New Hampshire's affordability challenge isn't just about high prices overall. It's about the type of housing being produced. Manufactured housing plays a critical role in the affordability landscape, yet supply is limited and often constrained by zoning and local land use policies. And so if we want to expand home ownership opportunities, this is an area that deserves much more attention. Now I'm going to go quickly because I know this is a lot of data, but I'll switch just quickly on looking at the geographic differences of how much home buying prices are. We can definitely see there is a variation by geography. But for example, Rockingham is the highest compared to all their counties at a median sales price at $670,000. And in people to afford that median sales price, that a typical household income we need to be a typical family we need to have about $218,000 a year in order to afford that type of sales price today in Rockingham County, which is much higher, significantly higher to the $103,000 that we see today. That's the median in New Hampshire. And so we can see that the percentages, huge complete percentage changes between 1998 and 2025. And so it can range between 335% all the way up to 427%. And so it's definitely very different. And it means that many households who normally buy are staying because many households price are much higher. This means that renters are staying longer, and buyers who do enter the market face a much steeper affordability hurdle. And so how much can New Hampshire workers afford in today's rental market? Well, it's definitely varies between the type of occupations. However, I'd say that this compares a lot of the essential jobs that are out there. And unfortunately, so the green bars show affordable monthly rent, assuming a full-time worker spends no more 30% of income on housing. The blue bars show the median statewide rents for a 1 and 2 bedroom apartment. What really stands out is that many essential workers, like childcare workers, home health care aides, and nursing assistants, can only afford rents well below the cost of even a 1 bedroom apartment. Even some middle income occupations struggle to reach the median rent for a 2 bedroom unit. This just isn't a housing issue. It's also a workforce issue. When people who power our economy can't afford to live near their jobs, it affects employers, communities, and long-term economic growth. To understand why affordability is so strained today, we really need to look back at how New Hampshire's housing production has changed over time. So this chart shows, so New Hampshire once actually led the nation in housing production. So what actually changed? This chart shows housing production measured as permits per 1,000 residents across New England states over time. Higher values indicate more housing being built relative to population. And historically, New Hampshire was competitive and at times a leader in housing production. We can see where periods where New Hampshire kept pace with or exceeded neighboring states. However, over time, New Hampshire has fallen behind its regional peers. While other states recovered or increased production, New Hampshire's growth has remained more limited. Most recently, New Hampshire is about 3.5 permits per 1,000 residents. That's below states like Maine and Vermont, and only slightly above Massachusetts, which has very different constraints and density. This suggests that housing production in New Hampshire is not keeping up with population needs at the same rate as neighboring states. Lower production relative to population contributes to limited housing supplies, increased competition, and rising costs. And so this trend really helps explain why we're seeing ongoing affordability challenges in the state. It's not just demand, it's that supply hasn't scaled at the same pace. So New Hampshire hasn't always been behind, but over time we've lost ground in the housing production relative to our neighbors. And so if New Hampshire wants to improve affordability, increasing housing production will be a critical part of the solution. And so we are talking about housing supply, so does completely remain constrained even with some recent improvement. So inventory is actually calculated using months of supply, which reflects how long it would take to sell all active listings at the current pace of sales. By that measure, supply has been well below what's considered a balanced market for much of the past decade, and especially tight since the pandemic. While inventory has ticked up slightly in recent months, it remains far below historical norms, continue to drive competition and price pressure statewide. So how much housing does New Hampshire actually need? So I just wanted to give a little context that by this was done this all of these this was done by his 2023 statewide needs assessment back in 2023, and these numbers are still relevant and help us understand the challenge before us in terms of the number of new homes we need to achieve a balanced housing market. So by 2030 we need almost about 67,000 new units between 2020 and 2030. This is accounting for seasonal homes, and about nearly 102,000 new units between 2020 and 2040. And to meet production needs, building activity must increase by 36% statewide over recent levels. So are we on track to closing the housing unit gap? We're on track, but we're not as close as we would like to get. So this slide really shows where New Hampshire stands relative to our statewide housing goal. Based on the statewide housing needs assessment, the target is 67,000 new units by 2030 to reach a more balanced market. Since 2020, New Hampshire has added 25,688 units, which puts us about 38% of the way there. In 2024, cities and towns issued permits for 5,822 units, the highest annual total since 2006. This is an important milestone and a sign that momentum is moving in the right direction. It's also worth noting what types of housing are being built. In 2025, multi-unit buildings accounted for 62% of new units, the highest share recorded in over 50 years. Single-family homes made about 36%, while manufactured housing represented just 1.94%. The takeaway here is that while we are making progress, we're not yet on pace to meet the 2030 goal. Sustaining higher production levels, especially across a broader mix of housing types, will be critical if we want to close the remaining gap. So ways that we can actually close the housing unit gap is we can expand zoning for manufactured housing. Only 10% of New Hampshire's buildable land allows manufactured homes with small lots. And we could also reduce barriers to accessory dwelling units by streamlining approvals and reconsidering restrictive requirements, enabling more missing middle housing like small multifamily homes within existing neighborhoods. And finally, we can reduce minimum lot sizes and better leveraging tools like the community revitalization tax credit tax relief incentive as RSA 79E that can help encourage housing production where it makes sense. Together, these strategies focus on unlocking housing opportunities within the community we already have. And Before wrapping up, I want to highlight some of the resources New Hampshire Housing makes available to support communities, policymakers, and the public. These include reports and data that dive deeper into affordability and housing trends, like fact sheets on key topics like accessory dwelling units and manufactured housing, and short educational videos designed to make complex housing issues more accessible. All of these materials are publicly available on nhhousing.org and are intended to support informed decision making, community conversations, and practical action around housing challenges across the state. I also encourage you to visit our website to check out our newly released accessory dwelling unit guide, which highlights how ADUs can benefit homeowners, renters, and communities. Thank you for your time today. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce Abby Bronson from the Community Loan Fund, who will talk about the role of manufactured housing and expanding affordable housing options. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Hi, I'm Abby Bronson. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Community Loan Fund, as y'all heard at the beginning of this presentation. Just a quick overview of the Community Loan Fund. We're a nonprofit lender that's been operating in Concord, New Hampshire for more than 40 years. And we really believe in the American dream of home ownership. Most of the work that we do here is designed to support Granite Staters secure and preserve affordable home ownership through manufactured housing. And I think Alexandra really teed it up beautifully of manufactured housing is the most affordable home ownership opportunity available. And the question is, well, why isn't there more of it? And I think part of that comes from, when I say manufactured housing, you all might not think of the home that you see before you today, which is a home that's in New Hampshire in one of our communities right now. You might think of a trailer or a mobile home. You might think of rusted metal edges and not a permanent housing solution. And I'm here to tell you that the manufactured housing of today is nothing like what you have in your brain. And so how I like to always start is with a little bit of fact or fiction. Let's see if I can move these slides forward. Here we go. So to dispel some of those initial thoughts you might have about manufactured housing, play a little game of fact or fiction. So what I hear the most often is manufactured homes are easily moved. And that's just fiction. Manufactured homes are designed to only be truly mobile once, from the factory where they're built to the site where they'll be permanently located. And once they arrive at that site, the wheels and axles, those are removed. They're put on a permanent foundation and they're connected to utilities just like any other home. And we know it is incredibly difficult, costly, to move those homes. It's not as simple as strapping it to the back of your truck and driving it away in the middle of the night. That's not the kind of housing that we're talking about here. Next, manufactured homes have been built to the HUD code since 1976. That's a fact, and I think that's one of the most important facts here for distinguishing what we mean when we say manufactured housing and how it isn't those trailers or mobile homes that you think of. So in 1976, HUD established a series of standards for how manufactured homes are built to ensure that the quality, safety, and durability of these homes and make them really so they're on par with site-built housing. That did not exist prior to 1976, so you saw a lot of variation in the quality of these homes and the standards. And so when we say manufactured housing, we're talking about something that's certified by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and very rigorously. And those standards are updated quite frequently, actually. As recently as 2025, that code was updated, so that manufactured housing of today is meeting the needs and how manufacturer standards have improved over time. Next, manufactured homes appreciate in value similar to site-built homes. Again, because of that long history of factory-built construction and some of the the lesser standardized home construction types. People think that manufactured homes don't appreciate in value. They think that they will actually depreciate, like your car or your a boat purchase maybe. But that's actually a fact that they do appreciate in value. And according to Federal Housing Finance Agency data, since 2012, manufactured homes have actually appreciated faster than site-built homes. So we know that when you're a homeowner, that's often your single biggest financial asset. And that is true for manufactured homes as well. It is an opportunity for families to really have that wealth building opportunity that homeownership presents at a much more affordable price point for them. And then finally, the waste generated from the construction of one single section manufactured home can fit in a 60-gallon garbage can. Also a fact. When you think about traditional housing construction, you might think about that big 30-yard garbage disposal out front when a new home's coming up. That's not true for manufactured housing. Because they're built off-site in a factory setting that can control for environmental factors, that can standardize the construction, you see a lot less waste, and you also see that reflected in the price. Because when you talk about manufactured housing, you can build a manufactured home for about half the price per square foot when compared to a site-built home. And so, in sum, when you hear manufactured home, I encourage you to think about these as home ownership solutions for the future. As Alexandra pointed out, they are among the only in the actual affordable price range for home ownership, putting home ownership back on the table for folks, including for folks like myself. I'm a young person who also rents, and home ownership feels deeply out of reach for me in New Hampshire, but manufactured housing makes it seem like maybe that will be an opportunity for me one day. And I'd encourage you to leave the homes of the past in the past, because that's not the type of housing that we're talking about. And I can't finish this conversation without another picture of a manufactured home and a modern manufactured home that you could buy today. If you know me, I'm always showing a picture of a manufactured home with a front porch because that's one of my dreams if I can be a homeowner one day. And so this home that you see is built to that HUD code standard, has a lot of the amenities that everyone wants out of a home. You want your garage, and you want granite countertops, and you want a walk-in closet, and all of that can be had with manufactured housing at a fraction of the price. And so it really makes sense why folks turn to it as an affordable home ownership opportunity in New Hampshire. Here really it hits home for me why it is such an important option for Granite Staters, because the average monthly cost of owning your manufactured home is about $300 less than renting an apartment of a similar size. So not only are you saving money when you own a manufactured home, but again, you're building wealth, and you are investing in that financial asset that is yours, and you get to really decide. And so we see Granite Staters choosing manufactured housing as a quality home ownership opportunity. Again, one of the stats that really gets me excited is 46% of manufactured homeowners are between 21 and 45 years old. This is a perfect option for young families just getting started, but also for older Granite Staters as well who are looking to downsize to single floor living. Manufactured housing is a great opportunity. It's also a great workforce housing option. And we see a lot of our most critical workers, our teachers, healthcare workers, and first responders, our skilled laborers, our veterans. They are choosing to call manufactured housing home, and it's putting home ownership back on the table for folks. And so I like to introduce folks to Andrew Moore. Andrew Moore is someone who got a mortgage from the Community Loan Fund to buy his first home at 22 years old, which blows my mind. You can see the home right behind him. It's beautiful. I've been out there to see it myself. Something that really strikes me about Andrew, aside from the pure fact that he was 22 years old when he bought that home and he got to start building that generational wealth, He was looking at homes in Manchester. Um, he looked at an apartment to purchase. He put an offer in. It was exceeded, and he said, "I didn't even want to really live there. It didn't have in-unit washer and dryer." He can have all of that and a yard and a full home with manufactured housing. And I think that's just a really powerful example. Um, but to Alexandra's point as well, more work needs to be done because for all these great things about manufactured housing, why isn't there more of it? What's kind of standing in the way here? Um, and a lot of it does come down to zoning. A lot of folks, similarly to, I'm sure a lot of you on the call, and to a lot of my friends and family, when they hear manufactured housing, they think trailers and they don't want to see that in their communities. But it is not the trailers of yesteryear, and it is again a very affordable home ownership opportunity for folks. And so part of getting those zoning laws changed is to start doing that education and making sure that people really understand what manufactured housing is and how it can help at a time when all types of housing feel so unaffordable and home ownership just really doesn't feel like an opportunity for folks. And we know that home ownership is a cornerstone of being a Granite Stater, of being an American. It's the dream. And we are trying to get back to that, and manufactured housing can help us get there. Um, and so with that, I would love to pass it to James Veo to talk a little bit more about other innovative opportunities to expand the affordable housing stock in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Abby. That was really nice. And as we'll see in the slide deck you have here, there's a commonality between what you just presented on manufactured housing and accessory dwelling units. But let me just start off by saying good morning or almost good afternoon. My name is James Veo. I'm with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And today I want to walk you through a new resource that has been released by New Hampshire Housing called a homeowner guide for ADUs. So the guide was created through funding from New Hampshire Housing and released by New Hampshire Housing to help demystify the process of building or developing ADUs. And the goal is really quite simple here. We want to make it easier for people to understand what's possible and how they can get started. ADUs are getting a lot of attention lately, but homeowners can still feel like the process is complicated. Most people don't understand. They don't build housing on a regular basis, so zoning, permitting, and financing can feel like an unfamiliar process. Add to that financing for ADUs is still somewhat tricky. It's a cottage industry, and there's no single standard approach to it. Importantly, ADUs are often long-term investment, not something that pays off immediately. And so I'm hoping this guide, which Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission helped put together on behalf of New Hampshire Housing, will be a tool to build confidence, helping people move from maybe to I understand how this works and moving forward with ADUs. ADUs are more than just a housing product, though. They're really about people and the relationships that they can host. They support aging in place, caregiving, and keeping families close but independent. They can also create income opportunities and help stabilize household finances. From a planning perspective, they make better use of existing infrastructure such as roads, utilities, and services because ADUs are going where homes already exist. They provide smaller housing options that match today's household sizes. Since the 70s, the size of the median household has dropped significantly. And today in New Hampshire, a significant chunk of total households are single person households. So an ADU fits that quite well. In general, they check a lot of boxes: social, economic, and community needs. But what is an ADU really? At its core, it's simply a complete living unit on the same property as a home. From a legal perspective, they need to have everything that a person needs for living. That includes sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. An important note here, uh, if any one of these components is missing, for example, a stove doesn't exist in a kitchenette, uh, then it's not an accessory dwelling unit in the eyes of the law. ADUs can take several forms. They can be inside an existing home, they could be a new addition attached to a home, or they could be a detached structure, like an ADU over a garage or a complete standalone building in a backyard. For most people, the first step is deciding if an ADU is right for them. This ADU guide, helps homeowners step back and think long term about their choice. Who is the ADU for? How might it change over time? There are social and financial considerations that every family needs to make. Uh, this includes things like how much privacy the home will have from the ADU. What are the income potentials or cost saving potential? The guide also introduces a realistic range of costs and financing tools so that people can ground their expectations early in the process. This section, this is an ADU right for me, part of the guide is really about helping people make informed decisions before they invest time and money. Part of why we updated this guide is there's some really timely changes in the state's law. In 2025, House Bill 577 passed and expanded ADUs to include detached units and made them allowed by right statewide. This means fewer projects requiring public hearings, where you have to notify your abutters and justify the project in a planning board or a zoning meeting. And many ADUs that homeowners seek to build can be approved administratively now. The law also clarifies that towns can regulate what towns can regulate versus what the state law requires. So for homeowners, the process is generally more predictable than it used to be prior to 2025. And for municipalities, there's a clearer baseline to work from. At the heart of the ADU guide is a step-by-step resource. It walks you through a 9-step process from early ideas all the way to construction and occupancy, and includes tools like sketching a plan, checking zoning, estimating costs, and identifying professionals. There's also a breakdown of financing options and how permitting typically works. The goal is not to overwhelm people, but to show them that the process is manageable and can be broken into to steps that they can follow. One of my favorite parts of the guide is these success stories that are included in it. The guide includes 6 real-world success stories from across New Hampshire, and each one shows a different type of ADU: a detached garage conversion, a do-it-yourself project, even a manufactured unit. So there's our overlap with Abby. One example includes an ADU being craned into place, which really shows how this manufactured construction method is evolving over time. These stories help people see what's actually possible and learn from whatever others have done successfully. Makes the whole idea feel more achievable for people who are interested in building their own ADU. So, uh, so maybe you're interested, you want to get started. And I would say start by learning, building confidence. This ADU guide is free and available online through New Hampshire Housing, We encourage people to share it with residents, board members, your clients if you work in the banking industry or other real estate industry, really anyone who's interested in housing and is willing to learn. Because the more people that understand ADUs, the smoother the process becomes for everyone over time. It's really about supporting informed, thoughtful development across the entire state of New Hampshire. If you have any questions about this ADU guide, or more generally, if you feel like if you have general questions, feel free to reach out anytime. We're happy to talk through how this applies to your community and your specific situation. And I want to thank you for your time, and that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you, James. And thank you, Abby and Alexandra. I wanted to mention that I didn't at the top that New Hampshire Housing has sponsored this webinar, excuse me. And some of the questions that have come in mostly involve whether the slide decks will be available to people. I can say that the entire webinar will be, but you guys who have all the slides, people are interested in seeing them and having access to them. So perhaps there's a way to do that. I do have a question for the group, and we're taking questions now. As I mentioned earlier, we have a new ADU design award in the New Hampshire Home Design Awards, and it just shows what can be done. Can you think of some of the most elaborate ones you've seen? I mean, the one I'm thinking about, I think, is up in the Lakes region or Portsmouth, and it really impressed me with what's being done with these spaces now.
Yeah, they are incredible, Mike, and I'm really excited for some of what we captured in the ADU guide. We really had 6 excellent examples across a spectrum of people building on a budget to people building really beautiful and elaborate projects. Some doing it with their own hands, and some having full service general contractors do everything for them. And so it really you can look at that and decide as a homeowner if you're interested in building an ADU, which path makes the most sense for me, and really have a lot of fun exploring the aesthetic elements as well.
A question from Laurie Raymond. She lives in a co-op. She has heard that larger corporations are buying up mobile home parks and then raising all the costs. Actually, one of the award winners for short film at the New Hampshire Film Festival was about that very subject in Florida. And I know that there's movements for ownership by the people that live in these parks. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
I'm happy to jump in there. Thank you for the question, Lori. That is something in New Hampshire when a manufactured housing community goes up for sale. Residents have the opportunity to purchase. We call it the 60-day notice law, which provides residents the 60 days to decide and come up with an offer on their community when it's up for sale. But what we do see is a lot of interest from some out-of-state private equity buyers who drive up the cost of those communities and make it much harder for residents to compete. But that's something that the Community Loan Fund is very deeply involved in helping residents throughout that process and helping them to decide if that's something, an opportunity that they're interested in. So I will, if I don't know how I can get my email out, but Lori, if I would love to talk to you a little bit more about that too, since you're a resident yourself, if there's a way that we can help.
Thank you. This question is from Paul Briand, who is a news writer who is writing about this story about this webinar for New Hampshire Business Review. So watch for that. And his question is the cost per square foot for an EDU less expensive or equally expensive as a home? Also, is a manufactured home an option for use as an ADU?
Yeah, so these are both excellent questions that we go over in the guide. And the short answer is ADUs are typically more expensive than the equivalent single-family home. And part of the reason for that is because all the systems that you need for a house need to exist just regardless of how big the box is. So if a typical home is 1,800 square feet and a typical ADU is 900 square feet, they all still have to have a kitchen, a bathroom, the fire alarms, the systems, the electricity, the electric panel. They need all those systems anyways. And so that tends to drive up the cost. But one of the things we did see and learned from the success stories is that that number is highly contingent on how much work a homeowner is willing to do. We've seen some homeowners that really did 90% of the work themselves, and it still was expensive, but the end product was fabulous, and the overall cost of construction was much lower than it would have been for that equivalent work from a full service contractor.
This is a question from Kelly Dimbat. What is the square footage limitation for an ADU? Are they allowed to have their own utility bills? And does that include a separate water sewer connection if public? And if septic, what are the bedroom count restrictions? And are two septic systems in the same lot okay? I don't know if that's addressed in the guide or not.
The guide does touch on all these things, and but for what this participant's asking, some of it they may have to go read through the fine print of the state law to understand fully. But the short answer is the state law sets some minimums or floor for how small an ADU can be, how small a town can restrict an ADU to be. But towns across the state have a variety of different sizes because the state law does not restrict towns from having a larger ADUs. So I know firsthand that some towns have a limit of 1,100 square feet for an ADU, while other towns have a limit of 750 or 950 square feet. And I'll note that 750 is the floor. That's as small as any town can limit an ADU. With on top of that, oh, go ahead. I was going to say that in terms of the connections, the state law is explicit in saying that the homeowner really has the freedom to make a determination of whether they want to connect it through their house or connect it directly to the utility. So it's up to the homeowner.
This question is from Lewis Nixon, and I happen to live in a condex. And I bet this is probably specific to what community you're in. His question is, can you put an ADU on a condex lot?
The state law explicitly gives the power to towns to restrict that. And my experience or observation is that most, if not nearly all towns restrict condos from having ADUs. So that may be something you need to lobby on at the local level if you want to see that allowed.
So I can't change that tool shed in my backyard into an ADU. It's not big enough anyway. This is from an anonymous attendee, and I think this is pretty early on in the process. But any insight on the resale value of ADUs compared to regular size homes?
This is an important distinction and one that is probably one of the contributors to drag on the ability for ADUs to be absorbed into the market, and that is that the cost to build an ADU exceeds its market value. So if you spent $300,000 building an elaborate backyard ADU at your house, when you're done and you go and get that assessed or appraised, it's not going to be worth $300,000. And so that alone, the property value of an ADU after construction, it cannot be a driving force in the decision for building one.
So you have to think about it. Do you want the extra income, or do you really need this for housing and somebody in your family?
Yeah. If you're thinking long term, 20 years, there's a lot of justifications there. But if you're looking to build it and then turn around and sell the property, the market dynamic doesn't work yet.
So this is a helpful project, a helpful way to ease the shortage, but it's not a replacement, certainly. How many towns, this is a big question, and I know there's been a lot of stories about this. How many towns have pushed back on ADUs since the new guidelines were passed by the state?
I haven't been keeping tabs on that, but maybe New Hampshire, maybe Alex or Abby has some insight on that. But As far as I know, at least in the region I serve, we haven't had any towns come out with sort of backlash on ADU law changes at the state level.
Well, this is a question from Darren Winham, and he's asking, can we have a webinar on how to use the ADU guide? So maybe there's a sequel here.
I'd be happy to do that.
From Alexander Mello, hi, what is the reference you are relying on to claim that an ADU needs to have an oven in order to be considered an ADU? Or if it only has a stovetop without an oven? Then we're getting very specific here. But good questions.
Yeah, he is getting the specifics. It really comes down to the building code, and I don't have it in front of me, nor do I have it memorized. But essentially, the building code sets the controls on these things.
This is a question from anonymous attendee. For James, I noticed in the guide that the factory-built ADU was the most expensive. Can you speak to some of the costs involved and why that might be?
Yeah, well, when we interviewed, there's two factors there. When we interviewed that homeowner about that success story, they had ran into an unfortunate challenge of very complicated site work, and the site work turned out to be far more expensive than anticipated. And the second is they used a full service general contractor to deliver that project for them. And so both of those things raised the cost, and it really did become a significant cost. But I would say on average that is unlikely. And I would also say that in the future, there's a lot of promise for manufactured ADUs to actually drive down the unit cost significantly. As if we can start seeing numbers around 50, 100 manufactured units a year being built in the state of New Hampshire, you're going to see that they can streamline that production and pass on savings to consumers to grow the market of people who want to build these things.
This is from Christopher Brooks, who is a reporter for the Co-Star News, and this is for the panel in general. He's asking about the geographical challenges New Hampshire faces when trying to add more housing. For example, the northern part of the state is significantly more rural, and the infrastructure needed often does not exist if someone wants to do a manufactured home or ADU. When you look at the northern part of the state, what else needs to happen in order for more housing to be built there, no matter what form that takes?
Abby, I don't know if you have some insight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the discussion of how we continue to push forward on the housing solution in areas like the North Country. That's where I'm from. And so that's why I get excited about manufactured housing, because we know we want more home ownership opportunities and not necessarily the big apartment buildings that you see in Manchester. But infrastructure is a very real issue, and that does just ultimately impact the cost that you can, the cost benefits that you could see from manufactured housing. Because when you don't have the infrastructure, then those costs just get added to that initial, because you'll see the same kind of site development work for manufactured housing that you'd see with a site-built home.
This question is from Mary Sullivan. She's asking which local lenders and loan programs are available for home purchases in co-ops and private parks. She adds that 30-year terms are often unavailable and higher rates are often associated to manufactured homes in co-ops and private parks.
Yeah, so I can get a list of some folks. There are some great community banks doing it. We also are a lender. We provide manufactured housing mortgages. So that's for that's limited to homes on their own land or in resident-owned community, the cooperatives. So that product is a little bit more limited, but I can follow up with a list of some other lenders. I know that sometimes the challenge in private parks is you own the home, but you don't own the land underneath that home, and that can make it a little bit more challenging for financing.
This is about ADUs from Darren Winham, and it's not a question, but he's just talking about how there are a lot of banks that have created loan programs specific to ADUs, such as Lighthouse Bank. And he's giving a shout out to Ryan Pope, formerly of New Hampshire Housing, who was instrumental in creating it.
Yeah, I would second that in noting that one of the great things that came out of the ADU guide is a series of appendices. And one of the appendices we have in there lists all the banks that are offering ADU specific lending products. So if people are really interested in building an ADU and they get to the step where they're considering financing one, there's a great resource right there on the webpage for the ADU guide for an assortment of banks you can contact.
This is from Heather Shank, who asks, can ADUs be sold separately from the primary home?
The state law allows towns to make a determination if they want to do that. I don't know of any towns that have done that, but the state law has enabled the ability for towns to do that.
This is another anonymous question from somebody who didn't give their name. Do you see any initiatives from towns or cities linking to New Hampshire housing documents, doing public outreach workshops, info sessions, or communities linking residents to possible financing options or programs banks may have? Now, that's a lot, but I think it's what kind of trends do you see with communities?
I don't know if Alex has something to contribute to that. I think the previous answer about the appendices for the ADU guide is the resource I would point to people to for ADUs. But if they're looking for other housing financing solutions, I would tell them to talk to New Hampshire Housing.
Okay, here's a specific one. We'll see if you guys can tackle this. It's from an anonymous attendee who's looking to build a garage in 1,000 square foot ADU in New Boston. First quote was 450,000, which doesn't include costs like site work, such as tree removal. Waiting for other quotes. Got a little sticker shock. Thinking, is this price pair reasonable? Is there any more data where you can see comparable costs?
Unfortunately, that is probably a reasonable number.
Mhm.
That is the world we live in today. In my work here at the Planning Commission, we recently did a cost analysis in one of our wealthier suburbs, and it doesn't matter which town you're in, but the cost of construction in the sort of larger municipalities in southern New Hampshire, it's going to be around 350 square feet. And so at 1,000 square feet, that's $350,000. And then you add a garage to that, and your site work maybe is a little over cost, but that is in the ballpark of what costs are today.
This is just a comment from Mate Kuhn, who's letting us know that Peterborough has been holding ADU workshops and has an affordable housing committee looking at that. Question from Mary Sullivan: is the state of New Hampshire willing to sell excess state property for ADUs? And let me get back to it. I lost it a little bit. To help for co-op parks to fill this massive void. And I can say that we know the Governor Ayotte recently said, considering using surplus state land for housing, but not specifically this kind of housing. This is another question from. Go ahead,
Mike. I'll just note that the recent state law passed does enable planning boards to develop an inventory at the local level for such exercises. So, not a direct answer, but a resource to point.
Thank you. Another question from Christopher Brooks from the CoStar. Does the state offer any grants or maybe even forgivable loans for homeowners to help fund the purchase of an ADU? If not, do you think doing so would further encourage more people to add them to their property?
One of the other publications that Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission helped New Hampshire Housing develop was a policy and practice in ADU production, basically success stories from other communities. And one of the things we learned there is that the upfront cost of permitting approvals and planning, and maybe a little bit of site work, were a major hurdle for homeowners because getting through those things meant burning the cash they had in savings and without the project yet being financeable. And so a lot of communities, the state of California, the state of Vermont, many others have figured out that to give planning grants was the most effective way to help increase production of ADUs. And so really addressing that first hurdle of risk is huge. In the past, loan programs have been set up with, where interest rates were reduced, and that helps after the barrier of risk has been overcome. But I would say if you really want to incentivize production, you should help homeowners right at the beginning of the risk, which is permitting and approvals.
Here's an anonymous attendee who maybe won't be anonymous eventually, because based on this question, we are a company that is going to go live this quarter with our first prefabricated ADU. We're excited to be able to offer this new product. I think this will be a huge opportunity for affordable housing. Would there be a way for us to get added onto the list of professionals and trades when we are ready to go live?
I am sure New Hampshire Housing would love to do that.
And that just shows you the direction. If somebody is willing to work on that, then there's a market for it, right? This is a comment from Randy Hillman, who's a real estate broker. And you guys can, it's not really a question, but perhaps you guys can comment on this. Small New Hampshire rural communities don't want any higher density housing. He sees resistance all over the place. You have to get the towns to lower their minimum size lots. I mean, that's an issue that we've been talking about for a while. Anyone on the panel care to comment on that?
Yeah, just say at the Regional Planning Commission level, we see the same thing, and would note that lot size is a significant barrier to housing production.
Thanks, James. We're getting close to the end. Alexandra, as the host of our event today, New Hampshire Housing, do you have any parting comments you want to mention before we close off?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think housing is not just like a town issue or it's definitely like it's our region, it's a statewide issue, and it really like impacts everybody. And so I really think like it's what coming today with James and Abby, like just telling the story of like what towns are doing in order to increase housing production. It's important to understand that that we need to make housing affordable because, as we all know, New Hampshire is an aging state, and we need to attract young families, and also birth rates have gone down very like half of what it was back in the 1980s. And it's important that we all play a role to be able to build homes and attract young families, have a more workforce, because we do need teachers, we need home health care aides, we need nursing assistants, and they need a place to stay. And so we all have a responsibility. It affects all of us. You may not see it directly, but it does impact everyone. And I think we all have a role to play in how we want to advocate to increase housing in order to have a stronger granite state for the future. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you, Abby and James. Like I learned so much about ADUs. I'm not a homeowner, but I mean, I would love to have an ADU if I am able to. But I think it's an incredible way to increase housing production.
Thanks so much. I hope everybody learned a lot. We appreciate all the great questions. I'm Mike Cody, editor of the Hampshire Business Review, and please look for a story from us soon, as well from Paul Briand, as well as the webinar. You can watch it and share it with friends. Thank you so much.